Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to another watercolor demo. Remember, if you like this content, please hit like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. So today we're gonna paint this scene from downtown Stockholm, and a nice scene of showing all the bridges that are connecting the various islands that Stockholm is built on. Now, what you see now is what the painting is gonna look like when we're almost done. So of course we're gonna show you the process leading up to that. But first, let's take a look at the reference photo I used for this one. So as you can see, it's covering a lot of space here. But when you study the world around you, looking for subjects, you often tend to look at the world with sort of a zoomed-in eye and view of the world. And in the end, I decided that this is the rather narrow part of the scene that I wanted to paint. So I've cropped the reference photo quite a lot here, and starting to sketch things out. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just want to say that this painting I'm doing on hot press paper, which is quite unusual for me. I do sort of 9 out of 10 paintings on rough or cold press paper. Hot press paper is smoother to the touch, and it is, as it sounds like, it's been pressed, so it's got a different texture, and it absorbs water and pigment slightly differently. And yeah, again, most of the time I prefer rough or cold press paper, but it's fun to switch gears and sort of change techniques and materials every now and then to just develop as an artist, I guess. So here you can see me putting in a first wash with some warm grayish hues. And this is going to be the base coat, so to say, for the distant buildings, but also for the cloud, where there's a big, pretty dramatic cloud in the background there. And we're going to use that in our composition. In the reference photo, the cloud is slightly larger to the left, but I'm opting to build it up and make it slightly larger to the right instead, to sort of balance the silhouette of and the skyline of the buildings in the reference photo. So working quite rough here with a big flat brush. It's a nice way to start a painting, to really look at the big picture and then work with the broad brush strokes first. And as always, I'm from the moment my brush touches the paper, I'm thinking about values. And here I'm already starting to put in some darker values in this formation of clouds in the background. And I'm gonna put many more, because it's quite important for the sort of the drama and the story of this painting, for those clouds to be quite dark and provide a dark background to some of the buildings in the foreground. Now, working on hot press paper is slightly different, as I mentioned. One thing is that the paint and the water tends to sort of stay on the surface a little bit more. It doesn't get absorbed by the paper in the same manner as rough paper. So sometimes it feels like you're sort of pushing pigments and water around on the surface, and then all of a sudden it sort of adheres to the paper, and you can get some really sharp edges and, yeah, defined shapes. That can be good. I think hot press paper is really good if you want to paint small details and really detailed paintings. It can be a challenge though if you're trying to do sort of loose technique watercolor as I usually do. But again, it's a nice change of pace and a challenge. I just try to be extra mindful to keep my washes really flowing, so we don't, and also to make sure that we connect shapes all the time before the paint starts to dry and stick to the paper. And the way I'm choosing what to paint here is really dictated by how do I connect shapes. So I'm mostly thinking about where do I need to go next to connect shapes. And here we're putting in some trees. They are slightly green, but I don't want them to be very bright green, because green is a tricky color, and they're quite pale in the reality as well. So now we're starting putting in some of the big shapes that will be defining the subject, and that's of course this building in the background here. It's got some nice architecture to it, and it's got bright sunlight hitting the slanted roof on that building that creates a nice dramatic effect towards the slightly darker clouds in the background. And there's a copper tiling on this roof, so it's sort of green, and I want that to connect with the brownish, purplish walls of that building. So I'm trying to move fast enough that those washes can connect and really merge in a nice way. Intentionally keeping all the architecture and details on this building and all the other buildings quite simple, leaving a lot of work to do for your imagination to fill out the blanks and add little bits and pieces that are missing. I think this is quite enough to tell the story, so to say, and give us an understanding that we're looking at this type of building, older type building with some nice architecture on it. And then there's this building in the foreground. There's actually a few more and there's some scaffolding and stuff that I just opted to leave out. It wasn't adding to the subject. And this one is gonna have to be sufficiently dark to make sure it's clearly in the foreground compared to the other buildings. Moving on to the bridge here, that's closest to us. It's got a colder hue and also needs to be fairly dark for us to sort of sense the distance between objects in this scene. And I'm constantly looking at my painting as I go along and thinking about the values. So you can see me going in with darker values still here on the trees, for instance, because those are obviously too bright as they were. I'm leaving just the sort of lighter edges around them where the sunlight passes through the leaves and the branches. And while the wash is still damp, I can move in with yet another touch of dark pigment and lift some edges here and just create some more volume to those trees. There's some stuff going on that bridge. There are a couple of vehicles, some people moving around on it. So I'm putting that in so that they also have a chance to blend in a little bit with the washes behind it. So now moving on to more detail work. It's important to just indicate these details and not obsess and try to get every window in the right spot and so on. It's actually good to intentionally leave out some, for instance, if you have windows on a building, leave some of them out so you don't have a pattern that's repeating and sort of inviting scrutiny. And now for the big challenge in this subject actually, which is the water. So as mentioned, the hot press paper is quite smooth, but I'm still trying to achieve some sparkling water effects here. There is some texture to the hot press paper. It's just much less than on a rough paper surface. And as you can see, I'm getting away with it, sort of, using a smooth squirrel brush, dragging very quickly across the surface. I can generate these sparks. And then I'll go after with a slightly wetter wash and add some depth to the blue of that water surface. And while this wash is wet, I'm also putting in these shadows that are these cast shadows from the bridge, which is nice because I want a sort of soft edges around those. Using a spray bottle to add some water to the wash to keep it alive more, keep it more receptive to new washes and brush marks of water and pigment. And I'm going even darker to the left side of this bridge, and that's sort of a focal point, and I want that to be really like a magnet for your eyes. So I'm putting in some really dark values there. and that tree behind it as well. And as I suspected, this building to the far left, which is much closer to us, it needs to be stronger still, so had to go in with another wash on that one. And taking the opportunity to add a few more, just indicating some architecture details. Same here with the bridge, some railings and stuff, but it's very... try to be playful rather than accurate in my brushwork here. Now, as I'm looking at this, I sort of feel it's a little bit... it's lacking some color variation, and it's not monochromous. It's almost duochrome right now. So I'm electing to go in with some very thin splashes of red here towards the lower right and various parts of the subject, just to get some more variety, and also hoping that going over with another wash on these by now fairly dry earlier washes, that can create some nice effects, some diffusion, if you will. I'm pretty eager not to have my paintings too tidy. So yeah, this is experimentation, but that's important and fun. I'm thinking it's working out quite well. Adding that thin wash of red adds a bit more warmth to the painting, and I got a bit more life and more of a vivid impression in the painting. So I realized I've forgotten to do these church towers in the far background. They are quite clearly visible in the reference photo, and add a bit more life to the composition as well. They look fairly dark now, but as you remember, things will fade as it dries up, so should be okay in the end. Now, before I wrap things up, I want to see if I can push this contrast to the lower left sort of focal point of the subject even further by adding yet another wash to this shadow, this cast shadow beneath the bridge. Might be taking it a step too far, but it's creating a strong effect at least. There's no doubt where the point of interest is in this painting, I think. Now I'm just probably approaching the point where I should tell myself to let go and let the painting rest and avoid overdoing things. It's very easy to end up sitting there with some paint still in your brush, and you just want to put it somewhere without thinking of the sort of purpose of that. So I decided to, here you can see me going slightly darker on those trees. It's okay, I guess. But it's also somewhat detracting from the nice focal point I achieved towards the left of that bridge. But yeah, it's fine, I guess. Final touches with some white gouache. Have some railings, some people on the bridge, just a few dots and lines. Also a nice opportunity to touch things up if you manage to screw things up a little bit when you're doing negative painting around the smaller details. just adding a little bit more definition to the painting, which is a nice sort of when combined with a sort of a loose general style. You can add some definition with that white gouache towards the end that can be quite nice. And there we're done. I hope you liked this demo. If you did, hit like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.